An update on a high-profile sex trafficking case in Wilmington. Investigators charged 7 people in connection to Cape Fear Escorts, what prosecutors called an illegitimate business used to promote prostitution. WECT's Delaney Tarpley met with the DA, Jason Smith, today to get new details on the cases. Now, Delaney, you learned one of the defendants is no longer facing charges.
Yeah, that's right, John, but not necessarily because a jury found him innocent. Another of those defendants pleaded guilty to some charges in federal court, but he and 5 others still have not had their day in court for the state's charges.
A human trafficking investigation that is more than a decade old is still not over.
Once a survivor of human trafficking or prostitution comes forward, it's usually a he said, she said type of game. The complexities start with how do you prove, how do you corroborate what this young woman or woman is saying.
Prosecutors charged 7 defendants in the case related to Cape Fear Escorts, which investigators called an illegitimate business tied to prostitution and trafficking. But the list of 7 defendants is now down to 6. Brandon Holloman, who faced 17 charges that included promoting prostitution of a minor, died last October.
Obviously, you can't continue to prosecute somebody who's deceased.
His charges will be dismissed. But at the same time, Smith says progress has happened in one case at a federal level. Christopher Todd Evans accepted a plea deal in federal court, pleading guilty to charges that include sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. He is still in New Hanover County's jail on a bond of more than $4.5 million and waiting to be sentenced on those federal counts.
I won't comment on who's a ringleader and who's not. He is charged in the federal system and in state court. As to the other defendants, they are charged in the state systems.
But Evans and the 5 remaining defendants still have not gone on trial in state court. Smith says there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into proving those charges.
Investigation into digital forensics, talking about social media, phones, hotel records, social media ads. It's complex.
While the investigation against these defendants continues, Smith encourages people in the Cape Fear area to be more observant and speak up if something seems off.
Don't just walk away. I mean, if you think something's wrong, pick up the phone, call law enforcement and say that something is not right here. Because it may be that you are reporting on a potential human trafficking case.
Smith tells me that right now the court has not set trial dates for any of those 6 remaining defendants in the Cape Fear Escorts case. John.
Well, just last night, Delaney, you reported on another trafficking investigation that has connections to Wilmington. Did Jason Smith's office play any role in that?
No, they did not, John. The Brooklyn DA's office is leading that case because that's where the majority of the defendants were from. You can read more about that case over on our website.
All right, Delaney, appreciate it. Thanks.